4. The Abolitionist movement. It matters because the issue of slavery was far from being resolved in the United States. In the 1830s and 1840s, slavery became a hotly debated topic as calls for abolition were published throughout the land. The new abolitionists. Guiding question. What different methods of ending slavery were debated during this time? In the 1830s, a growing number of Americans had begun to demand an immediate end to slavery in the South. Of all the reform movements that began in the early 1800s, the movement to end slavery was the most divisive. By pitting North against South, it polarized the nation and helped bring about the Civil War. Early opposition to slavery. From the earliest days of the Republic, many Americans had opposed slavery. Some of the nation's founders knew that a nation based on the principles of liberty and equality would have difficulty remaining true to its ideals if it continued to enslave human beings. Gradualism. Early anti-slavery societies generally supported an approach known as gradualism, or the belief that slavery had to be ended gradually. First, they would stop traders from bringing any more enslaved people into the country. Then they would phase out slavery in the North and the Upper South before finally ending slavery in the Lower South. Some people in favor of gradualism felt that slaveholders should be compensated for their loss. Supporters of gradualism believed it would give the South's economy time to adjust to the loss of enslaved labor. Colonization. Few people in anti-slavery societies believed that ending slavery would end racism in the United States. Many thought the best solution was to send African Americans to their ancestral homelands in Africa. In December 1816, anti-slavery reformers founded the American Colonization Society, ACS, to move African Americans to Africa. By 1821, the ACS had acquired land in West Africa. The following year, free African Americans began boarding ships to take them to Africa, where they established a colony that later became the nation of Liberia. Colonization was never a realistic solution to racism. Moving roughly 1.5 million African Americans from the United States to Africa was nearly impossible. Furthermore, most African Americans regarded the United States as their home and did not want to move to another continent. Only about 15,000 African Americans moved to Africa between 1821 and 1860. Abolitionism. Gradualism and colonization remained the main goals of anti-slavery groups until the 1830s. Then a new idea, abolition, began to gain ground. Abolitionists argued that enslaved African Americans should be freed immediately, without gradual measures or compensation to slaveholders. The first well-known advocate of abolition was a free African American from North Carolina named David Walker, who advocated violence and rebellion as the only way to end slavery. Although Walker's ideas were influential, the rapid development of a large national abolitionist movement in the 1830s was largely due to the efforts of William Lloyd Garrison. William Lloyd Garrison, after working for a Quaker publisher of a Baltimore anti-slavery newspaper, Garrison moved to Boston in 1831. He founded and edited the anti-slavery newspaper The Liberator. The paper's style was anything but moderate, as Garrison wrote caustic attacks on slavery and called for an immediate end to it. To those who objected to his fiery language, Garrison responded that the time for moderation was over. Primary source. I am aware that many object to the severity of my language, but is there not cause for severity? I will be as harsh as truth, and as uncompromising as justice. On this subject, I do not wish to think or speak or write with moderation. No, no. Tell a man whose house is on fire to give a moderate alarm. Tell him to moderately rescue his wife from the hands of the ravisher. Tell the mother to gradually extricate her babe from the fire into which it has fallen. But urge me not to use moderation in a cause like the present. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard. From the Liberator, January 1st, 1831. In Garrison's opinion, the situation was clear. Slavery was immoral and slaveholders were evil. The only option was immediate and complete emancipation, the freeing of all enslaved people. In 1833, abolitionists founded the American Anti-Slavery Society, and Garrison became one of its key leaders. By 1838, there were more than 1,350 chapters and more than 250,000 members. Garrison and Theodore Weld recruited and trained many abolitionists for the American Anti-Slavery Society. Arthur and Lewis Tappan, two devout and wealthy brothers from New York City, helped to finance the movement. Other abolitionist leaders. Many women were active in the abolitionist movement. Among the earliest were Sarah and Angelina Grimke, South Carolina sisters who moved north to work openly against slavery. Prudence Crandall worked as a teacher and an abolitionist in Connecticut. Lucretia Mott, a women's rights advocate, often spoke out in favor of abolitionism as well. African American abolitionists. Not surprisingly, free African Americans played a prominent role in the abolitionist movement. Even before Garrison launched his crusade, African Americans had established at least 50 abolitionist societies in the North. African Americans bought copies of the Liberator and helped sell copies. Many began writing and speaking out against slavery and taking part in protests and demonstrations. Frederick Douglass was one of the most prominent African Americans in the abolitionist movement. In 1838, Douglass had escaped from slavery in Maryland by posing as a free African American sailor. Douglass wrote his autobiography in 1845. He also published his own anti-slavery newspaper, the North Star, and became a powerful public speaker for the abolitionist cause. Primary source. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. Frederick Douglass, from a speech delivered in Rochester, New York, July 5, 1852. Another important African-American abolitionist was Sojourner Truth. She gained freedom in 1827 when New York freed all remaining enslaved people in the state. Her anti-slavery speeches drew huge crowds thanks to her folksy wit and strong message. Truth once said, "I have had 5 children and never could take any one of them up and say, 'my child,' or 'my children,' unless it was when no one could see me. I was 40 years a slave, but I did not know how dear to me was my posterity." The response to abolitionism. Guiding question. Why was abolitionism not a popular movement in the North or the South? Abolitionism was a powerful force, and it provoked a powerful response. In the North, citizens looked upon the abolitionist movement with views ranging from strong support to indifference to opposition. In the South, many residents feared that their entire way of life was under attack. They rushed to defend the institution of slavery, which they saw as the key to the region's economy. Reaction in the North. While many Northerners disapproved of slavery, some opposed abolitionism even more. They viewed the movement as a threat to the existing social system. Some whites, including many prominent business people, warned it would lead to war between the North and the South. Others feared it might create an influx of freed African Americans in the North, overwhelming the labor and housing markets. Many in the North also did not want to severely damage the Southern economy, which supplied Northern textile mills with cotton. Given this opposition, it was not surprising that mobs in Northern cities attacked abolitionists. A mob in Boston stoned and almost hanged Garrison. Lewis Tappan's home was sacked by a New York mob in 1834. In 1837, abolitionist publisher Reverend Elijah P. Lovejoy was killed trying to protect his printing press. Yet Northerners also resented Southern slave catchers, and Northern states passed personal liberty laws restricting slave recapture. Reaction in the South. To most Southerners, slavery was vital to Southern life. While the North was building factories, the South remained agricultural, tied to cotton and the enslaved people who harvested it. Southerners responded to criticisms of slavery by defending the institution. South Carolina's governor called it a national benefit. Thomas Dew, a leading Southern academic, claimed that most enslaved people had no desire for freedom because of their close relationship with their slaveholders. In 1831, 8 months after Garrison first printed the Liberator, Nat Turner, an enslaved man who was a preacher, led a revolt that killed more than 50 Virginians. Many Southerners thought newspapers like the Liberator sparked the rebellion. They demanded the suppression of abolitionist material as a condition for remaining in the Union. In 1836, under pressure from Southern politicians, the House of Representatives passed a gag rule providing that all abolitionist petitions be shelved without debate. Few people accepted the idea that slavery should be ended immediately. The abolitionist movement, however, became a constant and powerful reminder of how deeply slavery was dividing the nation.